second, and we are now recording. So this is a walkthrough of DecisionsFirst, the first software package that you're going to be using in the course. And of course, that's very important that we all have some awareness of that. And so it's very important that we have that working. So let me go and share my screen. I'm going to do a little presentation first, and then we'll do the walkthrough of DecisionsFirst. But I do have a little slideshow, as always, to talk about. Again, Zhang, you're still on there. Let me move you out of the way. Okay, I know you'd like to see the demo, but it's important to set the context. I think that's very, very important. As I've said in the orientation, and some of you attended that, and the overview of Data 610, one of the key things when you're dealing in the world of analytics is making sure that you're solving the right problem. So you should be seeing these slides, and I'll make them available. You'll have a copy of them, so don't worry about writing anything down. But I think it's important to set the context of why this is important. You know, we'll find out as you go along that too many analytics efforts are just wander into the data and see what we find. That's not the way to do it. That's very wasteful of resources. It often leads to no outcome at all, or a very poor outcome, and then people get discouraged with analytics. So I'm going to set the context a little bit here, and then we'll get into it. So we'll have this overview, a little bit of the software and context, then we'll have the demonstration. I'll talk a little bit about your first week's assignment, and then we'll answer questions, and I'll try to keep this to certainly no more than an hour. Okay. We used to use, when we had textbooks in this course, we used the textbook by Tom Davenport called Keeping Up with the Quants. I still highly recommend you go purchase it if you'd like to, but you don't need to. Remember, we don't require you to buy any books anymore or software. But basically, in that book, Mr. Davenport, and he was one of the gurus guiding the development of our entire MSDA program, said there are 3 steps to an analytical solution. First is frame the problem. That's the very first thing. That's what we're starting with right now. So when we say framing, what the heck do we actually mean? Somebody's not on mute. Please put your thing on mute. What do we mean by framing? Well, we mean what exactly is the problem you're trying to solve. You know, I am trying to address blah, blah, blah. How serious is it? Where are you going to get the information to address it? Who's going to be involved? What models are you going to use? How will we measure the results? Who's going to be involved? Who has a responsibility for various things? There's a lot of aspects to it. And it's very difficult to do. We've all been in meetings where there's a dozen people at the meeting, and as we go around the room and talk about it, everybody leaves the meeting with sort of a different mental image, a frame, if you will, of the problem, and they're all different. And so people start out in various ways, not knowing exactly who's doing what, and it doesn't work out well. I was privy to a lot of that when my 20 years in the Air Force, 20 more years in the federal government. It just seems to happen a lot. So I think framing is very important, and for years, I have looked for a good package to help frame the problem, and I think DecisionsFirst is that package. The second step, according to Mr. Davenport, is to solve the problem. Well, and later in the course, you'll move into using your first analytics package, Watson Analytics, and later on into more sophisticated packages, and that's what you do. And the third step is to be able to explain what you did. Tell the story. Communicate. Doesn't do any good to build an analysis if you can't relate what you did, explain everything to people who are the decision makers, usually not the analysts, and make it make sense. So we're going to use the first software package in the entire program called DecisionsFirst. I love the quote here by Albert Einstein. If I were given, somebody still is not on mute. I think it's Zhang. You got to put your computer on mute, please. If I were given 1 hour to save the planet, I would spend 59 minutes defining the problem, another way of framing, and 1 minute resolving it. Well, we're not going to spend 59/60ths of our course framing it, but we are going to spend at least a couple of weeks with framing, and then you can revisit that periodically as appropriate throughout the program. Now I'm going to use a few of Mr. Taylor's slides. Remember, James Taylor is the guru, CEO, owner, and creator of DecisionsFirst, and he works very closely with us. In fact, Mr. Taylor and I have presented at a couple of conferences jointly, promoting both the UMUC program and his software. But here's his take on why this is a critical thing to do. As we all know, and this is a little bit of review for most of you, there are various levels of decisions in the organization. There are strategic decisions. Those are few in number, but have significant impact, like what product should we even make, or should we produce offshore? Should we change our entire business model? Should we merge? Those are very difficult, soft, squishy, mostly qualitative in many aspects kinds of decisions. Decisions First is not a package really designed for that type. In the middle level, decisions that occur a little bit more frequently are sort of management control, moderate impact decisions. You know, reorganizing the supply chain, changing your risk management, maybe deciding to use a different vendor, a different supplier. Those decisions occur periodically. They're what we call tactical decisions, and they too have an impact. And then at the bottom of the organization are what we call operational decisions. These occur each and every day, repeatedly, over and over. Each of them has a very, very small impact on the overall success of the company, but collectively, operational decisions have a tremendous impact on the overall efficiency, effectiveness, and profitability of a company, especially over time. Operational decisions are where Decisions First works best. I won't say it's the only place because I have seen people use it for tactical level. I don't think it really would be appropriate for strategic. And I'll talk about some of the features that make it ideally suited, I think, for operational decisions. In other words, again, decisions that occur repeatedly, each of which has an impact on the bottom line, albeit minor, but collectively, because there's so many of them and they occur so often, they have a large impact. So here are the criteria that would be ideal for to use the Mr. Taylor software Decisions First. Decisions that are repeatable. In other words, they occur often. That's operational. Decisions that are non-trivial. I think we can all agree that solving trivial decisions with any kind of an analytics approach would be a waste of effort. Somebody still has their computer not on mute. Please put your computer on mute so we don't get feedback. Thank you. The third thing we really need to have is measurable business impact. In other words, each of these decisions that are repeatable and non-trivial does have an impact on the bottom line, albeit maybe small individually, but collectively large. And then the final thing that he thinks would be ideal for using Decisions First for would be decisions that are candidates for automation. Now, we don't do much with that last one, the bottom right criterion in this course, but later on in the program you will see that being able to embed decisions via business rules, via decision management, perhaps embedding some artificial intelligence, does make a big payoff in organizations. But we're going to focus on those top three: repeatable, non-trivial, measurable business impact. So when you get to that first assignment, and I'll revisit this tonight, and you start thinking, what kind of a decision do I want to frame using Decisions First? Think of those criteria because those are ideal. And I'm going to walk you through an example of one, as well as the demo and the tutorial he has is also ideally suited. Now, what does the software actually do? Well, let's talk about that. These are the things, the parts, if you will, the steps that are involved in using Decisions First software. First, you have to identify the decision. Everything starts with a decision. What is it you're trying to decide? That focuses you immediately. I'm trying to decide whether to sell this mortgage. I'm trying to decide whether this customer is likely to churn. I'm trying to decide whether this transaction is fraudulent. I still hear somebody's computer. Please put your computer on mute. The second thing you need to do is describe that decision. You identify it and then you describe it. Here's what I want to tell you about it. Here's why it's important. Here's why it impacts the business. Third thing is then start drilling down and getting into some of the detail. When we talk about making a decision, there are a lot of things that go into that. How much time do we have? How complicated is the decision? What kinds of information do I have? What kinds of information do I need? What kinds of data do I have? What kinds of regulations, office in OIs, instructions from the boss, etc. All that has to go into the process. What kind of subsidiary decisions are there that impact the mega decision? And we'll get into that. So you go through and refine this and complete the model, and then when you're all done with Decisions First and hit go or hit print, you will have something called an Analytics Requirements document. You know what that is? That is a complete outline of the decision. If you are using it in a group format, and we're not, you'd have everybody sign on to that. You'd have everybody agree that, yes, that's what we're doing. That's who's going to do it. That's when we're going to do it by. That's how we're going to do it. That's the information we have. That's the information we need. Those are the regs that impact us. Those are the government policies we've got to adhere to. Those are the privacy, security aspects we've got to consider. All of that. So as you begin to see, framing the decision is not a trivial exercise. So when we get into DecisionsFirst software, we're going to put this together piece by piece. And as I mentioned, some of those pieces, what is required to make the decision? What information do we need? What guidelines, policies? What expertise do we need? Maybe we need Mary's expertise. She's the expert all about how to do this. Maybe we need Tom's inputs. What regulations impact us? What predictive models are we going to use? Remember, this is an analytics program, so yes, you will need to include in your DecisionsFirst frame at least one mention and outline and description of some sort of an analytic model that would be appropriate. We're not asking you to build the model. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And then the results of other decisions. Almost invariably, every decision has subsidiary decisions that need to be made first. And I'll give you an example of that coming up. So what does this look like when we get into the software? And I'll get into the software in about 5 more minutes, so be patient. It looks like this on the screen. It's a pretty simple software package to initially use. Later on, you begin to appreciate the depth and the sophistication that's behind the scenes. But here's a decision. In fact, this is the one that Mr. Taylor walks you through at his website, the tutorial. It's about a 45-minute, excellent tutorial. He, of course, knows the software much better than I do, but I like to do my more folksy approach to amplify on that, because I know that as people who are just beginning to use the software, some of these questions come up each semester. So in his tutorial, maybe some of you already looked at it, his overarching decision, his mega decision, if you will, is selecting a marketing offer. You know, you're a company, you have customers. Some of them are thinking about leaving your company. We call that churn. It happens a lot in the cell phone business, as most of us know. It happens with television subscriptions, internet services, etc. So he's trying to decide. Now, if you gave everybody an offer to keep them around, it would be expensive. If you didn't give anybody an offer, then you'd lose a lot of people who wanted to leave and found a better deal. So the question becomes exactly how do I adjudicate that? Which ones do I want to give offers to? And what kind of offer? Do I give them a free coupon for Arby's? Do I give them a $10 rebate? Do I include an extra service? A lot of complications. And he walks you through building the pieces that go with this very step at a time, and it's quite good. You'll see on the left some ovals. Ovals represent information sources, data, if you will. In fact, they're called data inputs. Marketing offers. So we've got a database of all the offers we could give us a person we thought might leave the company. We've got another database of what? Our customers. How long they've been with us, maybe some demographic information about them, etc. What else do we have? Well, we have knowledge. These are the softer things. This is where expertise, regulations, guidance from the boss, all those things come in. So customer loyalty, somebody's keeping track of that, or somebody has a good way of measuring that. Marketing know-how. Maybe there's a person in the organization that says, oh, here's what we used in the past, and here are the things that work. That's know-how. That's expertise. Customer propensity to accept. Maybe we built a model that says, oh, people that are over 50 aren't going to accept an offer that says, a coupon for the gym or something. So we have expertise. We call it knowledge. We have data. We call information. And we have decisions. Those are the 3 main building blocks of the software, and you'll see there's many other supporting building blocks. So what do you do with the building blocks? Well, you start putting them on the screen. You are going to be the expert in whatever decision you decide to use for assignment 1. We're going to let you pick your own decision. The example I'm going to walk you through tonight is from one of our students of a couple of years ago. He was a mortgage banker, and he said, you know, one of the decisions we have to deal with repeatedly is what to do with mortgages that are in arrears. Do we keep them? Do we sell them? Do we try to recover? Do we take our losses? And so I suggested he model that, and he did such a good job that Mr. Taylor asked and got permission to include that in his literature. So I'll come back to that in a minute. So as Mr. Taylor fills out his tutorial on the marketing offer, you can see he begins to put some of these icons on the screen. Remember, rectangles are decisions, ovals are data, the rectangle with the beveled bottom, knowledge source, expertise, regulations, etc. And then you start linking them together. What impacts what do I need, and putting detail in that. So your screen's going to look a little bit like this, and again, I'll be in that in just another minute or two. And you'll begin to connect things. You'll say, you know, in order to make a decision about what marketing offer to give a person, I first have to make these decisions. I have to check the offer timing. Maybe we just gave them a coupon a month ago. We can't give them another one. I have to determine the offer products that are available. Maybe our special coupon that we give out has expired and we can't give that anymore. I have to determine the offer value. I don't want to give somebody $1,000 so that I keep $100 worth of value. These are what? Decisions. And these are some of the, again, data sources, sources of expertise, and you'll notice the expertise icons are connected with a dotted line. And then what? Well, we can drill down. Let's go back to one of these things. If we had an icon called Determine Refund Eligibility, you can drill down and put in all of these things, and I'm going to do that in just a minute. And so you have to flesh these things out. Remember, when you're done, this is a totally completed document that someone could open up and say, I see how Steve Canode is intending to make this decision. I see the information he has. I see the information he needs. I see the expertise he needs. I see the analytical model he's going to use. I see the subsidiary decisions he has to make first. I see how it all fits together. I see who's going to help him. I see where he's going to get the information. That is what I call a complete frame, and it is critically important. So you drill down. You can say what kind of answer, what kind of question we're going to answer, how we're going to answer it, etc., and I'll get into that. So I'm going to skip all that. So here's what Mr. Taylor's model looks like when it's complete. The brown bars are not part of the software. He put those in just to illustrate some things. So there's always one overarching decision, a main decision, a meta decision, whatever you want to call it, one of those. And then there are supporting or subsidiary or subordinate decisions under that. So before I can make this decision, I have to make these here. Before I can make this one, I have to make these, and so forth. You can see he's got several data sources. There's 1, 2, 3. Remember, the ovals are data sources. He's got several sources of expertise, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this is a fairly complex decision. And again, if you drill down on any of these pieces, you would see there's a lot of detail behind them. And I'll show you how to add that detail. Now, what we're going to deal with is a different decision. Get my cursor. Uh-oh, my computer is... Sorry, wait a minute. I have a computer locked up here problem. There we go, I think. Let's see. Okay. Trying to get to the next slide here. There we go. This is the problem that the student did at UMUC. Again, it was a decision about whether to hold or sell distressed mortgages. And you can see he put in quite a bit of effort in fleshing this out.
For some reason, I cannot get my...
We still have somebody not on mute. Please put your computer on mute. Please put your computer on mute, everyone. You should see a mute button over there. Okay, don't want to get any feedback. It messes things up. Okay, so the overarching decision was hold or sell a distressed mortgage. You can see these are what? Sources of expertise. Sources of expertise, security trading regulations, FHFA mandates, balance sheet management directives, mortgage trader experience. You can also see some subsidiary decisions that have to be made first. And you begin to see how complex this whole analysis becomes when you're trying to frame this, because most complex, most reasonable decisions that have lots of importance to the organization are complex. And this helps you see how they're related. And again, you can drill down. So this was done by a student. And then when you get all done with it, you're going to have the overall analytic project documentation. You'll have an introduction. You'll have the objectives. You'll have all of these things, the decisions. All of that will be printed out automatically. Okay? Now, I'm ready to do the walkthrough of decisions first. My mouse just went dead on me, so if you'll give me about a 1 second pause. There we go. He's coming back on, I think. I'm hoping my battery will last because it works much easier for me with a mouse. And then I'll come back and talk about a few things. Give me 1 second to put a fresh battery in my mouse. Okay, I'm ready for the demo now. I hope people are still there. Now, you should still see the screen where I've logged in to DecisionsFirst Modeler. You'll have your login if you haven't received it already, and your screen will look exactly like this, with one exception. You will not have an admin icon. The admin icon is for the administrators, which would be your faculty members, your teaching assistants. And they don't use it for a whole lot. They do use it to add students and so forth. But you won't have that, but you'll have these others. Okay? You'll have these others. What you see across the top are the icons that can be used. This one, create a new decision requirements diagram. What we were looking at, that completed diagram, that picture you saw on the screen, is what we call a decision requirements diagram. That, along with all the supporting information behind the scenes together when you print it out, is called the analytics requirement document. So we'll see how that works in a minute. So that's where you create a new one. This is a decision icon. We know what that looks like, rectangle. This is an objective. Now I'll let that one sit there for a minute, come back to it later. You say, I didn't see anything about objectives in the presentation. And no, you didn't, but you will. This is an input data. So this is an oval, the data source. This is a knowledge source, the expertise that I talked about. Excuse me. There are other icons, a process, an event, a system, an organization, a data set, an analytic effort, and then a widget and a report. Okay? Now, we don't expect you in the couple of weeks that you have to use this software package to fully master the entire thing. But we do know that you'll be able to master enough of it that you can put together a reasonable data frame, a fairly complete one. And so I'm going to start by doing that. And I'm going to refer back to the slides. Let me scroll back up to this one. I'm going to refer back because I'm going to pretend I'm the student and I'm building this. Now, of course, the student wouldn't have this to start with. He or she would have to say, oh, let me think about this. Let me even use scratch paper or whatever. But the first thing we have is a decision called hold or sell distressed mortgage. So I'm going to start a new diagram. Click there. Here's our new diagram. You have to give the diagram a name. I'll call it decisions got to spell things right. First walkthrough. Okay, and then you can put as much verbiage as you want, and you should put a lot of verbiage to describe it, but that's not as important on the diagram as it is for everything else. So here are the 3 icons I did show you in the presentation, and those are the 3 we can use. The others are behind the scenes. You don't need to worry about sketch objects. Those are there just if you're thinking of using an object but don't really want to use it. You can put it out temporarily and let other people comment on it and so forth. Yeah, that's a good idea. But we're not doing it in a team environment, so don't need to worry about it. This you can put in a comment anywhere you'd like, and these are the connectors. So let's start with a decision. You drag it over. You can see it gets a generic name of decision, and of course we want to change that. We want to put in what? Hold or sell distressed mortgage. Okay, so I'll type that in. Hold or sell distressed mortgage. Now I'm not going to type a lot of stuff in tonight because that would take too long. So the diagram is called this. The decision is called that, and then there would be a description of that. Now this student, which was part of the project and was part of your assignment, put in complete descriptions of every one of those nodes. I'm not going to bother showing you that, but there was a lot of description. What I mean by hold or sell distressed mortgage is that we have to decide after so many months what to do with a mortgage, and this happens often, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? So I'm just going to show you how the software works, but remember, you would want to put in a fairly expansive description for each and every object. Let's go back and look at the diagram again. So there it is. What else can I put in? Well, let's put in another decision object. Evaluate profitability of selling mortgage. Okay, another decision. Bring it over. I'll just call it evaluate profitability. Save a little time. Okay. Now, up here are some new icons, and let me take a moment and talk about some of those. This one, very important, as I'm sure you recognize. Save. You want to save frequently so you don't have to recreate things. Now, there is an automatic save built in, but I would warn you, as always, save, save, save. Whenever you're just sitting there doing nothing, hit the save button. Export image. Suppose you end up with a fantastic diagram here and you'd like to use it elsewhere in a Word document or something like that. You can export that image with this icon. This is going to become a very important icon. It's called Edit Object. Edit Object. That's where we put in some details, and I'll do that next. This icon says print, but you could ignore that one. We have another way of printing, and I'll talk about it a little bit later in this walkthrough. It uses these 2 icons. Then, of course, there's a delete, refresh screen, and this just makes things larger, smaller, and so forth. And you can establish a permalink to this file if you so choose. Well, let's go back to hold or sell distressed mortgage and see what we want to do with that in terms of adding some details. Because, you know, hold or sell distressed mortgage. So how do we do that? Well, we highlight it. We come up here to Edit Object. We click on it. And you will see that there are many, many things we can add to help understand what we're talking about with each and every object. And they're all context sensitive. So if you're talking about a data object, it would be different. And if you're talking about a expertise or a knowledge source, it would be different. Here we're talking about a decision object. So, of course, we'd have that description that I said I wasn't going to take time to type. Type of decision. What is it? Well, as I pointed out earlier, this works best for operational decisions, and this is certainly an operational decision. What's the status level? Is it in process? Is it completed? Is it implemented? Now, you might wonder, why would you even worry about completed decisions? Well, one of the advantages, one of the mega advantages, in my opinion, of having a completely framed project is the audit trail that it gives you. When you're done and you've implemented the decision, you've done the analytics, you've made your decision, you've told the story, you've changed the way organization does a few things, maybe it worked, maybe it didn't work. In either case, you can go back and look at the frame and say, aha, we did everything right. We were just victimized by something, a flood, a hurricane, or something we didn't anticipate. Or you can go back and say, this didn't work because, look, we left out a key piece. By having that frame, you got an audit trail. Without that frame, you're relying on people's memory. Oh, I said that. No, you didn't say that. Yes, I said include that. No, you didn't say that. So the keeping track of your decisions, even after they're completed, is very useful. Suppose you had a URL that explains something about this node. whether it's a all about distressed mortgages URL. Maybe it's Wikipedia link to a distressed mortgage term or something. You put that right here. You can come down a little bit further, okay, and you can see how this decision is linked to other decisions. Right now it's not linked to anything, so there's nothing showing up, but there it is. You can also come down and see which diagram it's embedded in. Well, it's embedded in one I call Decisions First Walkthrough. You can see what kind of question this really addresses. What should we do with mortgages more than 6 months overdue? Maybe that's the decision. Maybe that's the question. There's always a question that goes with every decision. That's what you're trying to address, really, a question. You call it a decision, but it's a decision about a question. What kind of answers are going to be expected for this decision? Yes or no? And what's the default? We're going to say, in this case, it is yes or no. Instead of what should we do, I'm going to say, should we sell? Maybe should we sell mortgages more than 6 months overdue? Yes or no? The default is no. You can make the default yes. Maybe you'd rather have it multiple choice. Put your choices in, add them, and somebody picks one of those answers. Always, sometimes, never. Maybe it's a value from a database, a number, a field. Maybe it's a number within a range. Maybe it's some other thing. So you have freedom to put in something else. But we're going to leave it yes, no for this one. Supporting information. You could put in whatever you want here for supporting information. This student did. I'm not going to bother typing all that in tonight, but he did, and it's important in some cases. In other cases, it's pretty obvious what it is, but in many cases, it's good to add supporting information. Finally, something that I think is really unique and important, the characteristics of this decision. Is it something with high volume where we make it all the time? Well, I'm going to move the slider bar over to here and say, yes, this is a high volume decision. We make this quite often, every day, maybe every week at least. And we make lots of decisions. We're a big bank. We have lots of distressed mortgages. How complex is it? Well, it's pretty complex, at least medium. Again, these are a little bit subjective, but you as the expert on understanding the decision to be made would have some feel for this. How variable are it? Do all distressed mortgages look pretty much the same? Well, no, they look quite different. The rules that we could use to address this decision repeatable? Yeah, probably. Do we have good ways of measuring success? Oh, yeah, we've got some great ROI, and we've got some great KPIs, key performance indicators. And then time. How much time do we have to make this decision? Well, maybe medium. We've got to make it in a matter of weeks or days. In fact, you could put something in here about whether the value of the decision decays over time. In other words, if we don't make this in a week, the value of the mortgage drops by 5%. Okay, then you could also have other things linked in, objectives. Remember some of those icons I said were behind the scenes? I'll show you a couple of those in a minute. And finally, a place for comments. Check with Mary about this. Maybe I'm wrong. And then you always want to hit Submit. At the bottom of every one of these screens, there's a Submit button. And then you want to come up here, and here, guess what, is another Save button. So guess what we've done? We have fleshed out one object, one decision object. You'll notice it stays open up here. This is home. This is Decisions First diagram. This is the object we were working on. So we can close that or just leave it open and have these tabs open. I'll close it for now. Now, if you recall from the diagram that we're cheating from a little bit because we know how this turned out, the profitability is a subsidiary decision that needs to be made before we can make this. In fact, we need to make all these decisions before we can make this. So I need to link it directly to that. So let's go show how to do that. You have a couple of what we call connectors over here. You don't drag them. You click them. Then you come over and get right in the middle and then drag. Hold down your mouse button and drag, which is why I wanted to put a battery in my mouse. I'm not sure how you do it without a mouse. I'm a mouse person, so I needed a battery. So now it's connected. And again, what do you do next? Well, you hit Save. What would you do next? You'd probably go drill down and flesh out this one. Again, edit, and you'd go put in the particulars for evaluate profitability, right? Notice it's linked. Oh, profitability feeds into holder sell distressed mortgage. Okay, good. So I'm not going to do that, but you get the idea. Again, I'm giving you a short demo. Mr. Taylor does, again, a more thorough demo. And, of course, you can drag these around. You can box them and drag the whole thing around or whatever you want to do. But, again, periodically you want to hit save. Now, let's bring in something else. Let me go back to my diagram. Part of evaluating the profitability of selling the mortgage, in other words, is this a mortgage that's hot, it's in a great living area, even though it's distressed, we can get a lot of money for it, the market's up in that area, whatever, is to look at the market bid prices for that particular aspect. That is what? That's a data source. So we're going to go back over here and say we need one of those. Again, you will have to be the arbiter of what you need in your decision because you're going to invent or create or use something you're familiar with for your decision process. So this one's called market bid prices, so I will give it the correct name. And, of course, you'd give a description to that. I know I sound repetitive, but it's important to emphasize that when we, the faculty, are looking at what you submit, we would like to see a very thorough product. We'd like to see enough detail that even if we're not experts, I'm not a banking person, but I can certainly understand this project pretty well by looking at the tremendous amount of detail that the student included and explaining how the linkage was made. So market bid prices. Now let's edit that object and see what we get. Get something a little bit different. Again, description, sure. Data source. Where are you getting this data? Okay. If you had a data source, you'd put it in here. Data type. Is it unstructured, text, audio, video, or is it structured, numbers, or is it semi-structured? Who owns the data? I could say Canode owns this data. How complex is the data? You can say, well, this data has to be done with SQL. You have to retrieve it. It's not easy. It changes every week. It's maintained by the Fed, whatever you want to say, and a URL perhaps. And then if you scroll down a little bit further, again, there it is. It hasn't been linked to anything yet, so it's not going to show up as being linked. And there's no other additional data sets or anything linked to it, no comments. As always, when you're filling out the detail, I want to remind you, hit Submit and hit Save on this screen so that it's saved. You'll wonder where it went if you don't. And so now we have another tab up here, that one. I can close that tab. Since we're the decision maker, we know that that links to that. Oh, yeah, that's part of evaluating the profitability. So I've got to connect it. Click on the connector and let up on your mouse button. Hover over the middle, drag it over, boom, it's connected, hit save, and now you're on your way. We're starting to flesh out a complete decision requirements diagram, DRD. You get used to the terminology. So you can see it's pretty straightforward. Now let's go ahead and put in the third kind of object, which of course is an expertise source, a knowledge source we call it. Let's go to our diagram and say, well, we do need to know something about the security trading regulations, don't we? Yes. Can't just get rid of these things if we're violating that. So security, trading, regs. Okay, and again, a description. Now you'll notice that when you connect a knowledge source to a decision or a knowledge source to, you can connect it to a data source too, but when you do that, you connect it with a dotted line. That's what indicates very quickly when you view the diagram that, oh, those are expertise, those are knowledge sources, which are a different kind of cat. Knowledge sources, again, can be regulations. They can be direct guidance from the boss. They can be government regulations like this, security trading regs. So we use our other connector. Click on it, come over, hover over the middle, drag to where you want to hook it, and there you go. Okay? So the security trading regulations do have an impact on this the ultimate decision. So now we've got a fairly decent looking diagram. We're on our way. We're starting. Again, you want to save that periodically, and there you are. Now, there's a couple of things that are interesting. First, I mentioned earlier that it's really nice to have key performance indicators to measure how well you're doing, right? I mean, how do I know how well I'm doing on this decision or on this evaluate profitability? Usually we have some kind of ROI or KPIs attached to most decisions. Otherwise, you're not measuring them. So we need to do that, don't we? Well, where am I going to get that? Well, I'm going to go back here to Home. This is where all my objects show up. Okay? And we actually call key performance indicators objects. Or objectives, I'm sorry, objectives. Oh, here it is, objectives. So if I click on objective, I get a new objective. Okay? Now, maybe the objective is to measure profitability. And again, you just discuss what that is. You may have a URL to view where that's described. You may want to have another one, and so forth. And you say, well, now what do I do with it? Well, other than putting in a comment and stuff, there's not much you can do here, is there? What you have to do is go over here, because what you're going to do is attach this measure of profitability to some decision or some other node. Okay, so what node am I going to attach it to? I said I was going to attach it to evaluate profitability, which is a decision node, right? So let's go here and say I want to attach this to evaluate profitability. There it is. And so I grab this and drag it. Grab this. Come on, buddy. Oh, it's not. There it is. There it comes. Drag it down and put it in the decision node. Well, usually it drags down a little bit nicer than that. For some reason it's not dragging. It's dragging down, but it's not staying. Maybe it wasn't in the edit. Maybe I need to save this first. You know, I use it periodically, so measure profitability. I would probably need to go to measure profitability and drag that down. I'm not sure why it's behind the scenes, but it shouldn't be. Usually it stays right here. Evaluate profitability, and now it would show that it's attached to that decision, and it would show up when you print it out as part of that decision. Maybe I should have called it something different. Because that's a pretty close name to the other thing. Description. No, I don't know why it's behind that scene. Anyway, it comes down, but it's not staying where it should. Oh, there it is. Okay, it stayed. Something to do with the name there. Evaluate profitability. What's the impact? You could put an impact in there. You could put a contribution in there. You could write something in there. Again, you can put a comment. You could save that. So now we have attached a KPI. You could say this is measured yearly as a percent of how much last year's losses on distressed mortgages went down. Our goal is 5% per year or some such thing. You know, you'd want to, again, flesh out what this KPI is. Remember, you're not doing any math. You're not building any analytical models. You are framing the decision. Step one, frame the decision. We'll worry about things later. So I simply came over and typed in the name of the decision that it's attached to and dragged that down. Boom. And again, save that so that it's there. So I can close that tab. Here's my diagram. Here's my home key. So you can go and put in all of these things. You could put an analytical effort in. And by the way, I should point out before I forget, Mr. Taylor has detailed video walkthroughs, short ones, usually 3-4 minutes, on every one of these objects, in addition to his 45-minute overall tutorial. In the 45-minute overall tutorial, he does pretty much what I'm doing. In the detailed ones, he gets into specifics as to how you would use these things. You'll certainly want to look at the one on analytic effort. Okay, it works similarly. You attach it to a knowledge source. All knowledge sources, not all, but all analytic efforts, churn models or whatever. And again, you're not going to build an analytic model. You're not going to build an analytical model, but you're going to mention one. You might say dashboard. You might say churn model. You might say regression model. Some kind of model that you think would impact this. If you go back and look at the student diagram, here it is. Performing loan models. In other words, before I can predict performance, I have to have a model that tells me about that. Maybe it's a predictive model. Maybe it's a neural network. Maybe it's a decision tree. I don't know. He did not build this model. He simply put this, notice it's a knowledge source in, and he put an analytic behind it that he described, that he thought might be useful. Wasn't sure at the time, because he was just beginning the program, as are you. So now you begin to see that as you begin to add detail, you can delete, add, move, change, add things, and add enough expertise, enough knowledge, enough insight, so someone looking at the diagram can say, "Oh, I see what's going on here." Okay, I see what's happening. Now our diagram is pretty simple. That diagram, of course, is much more complex. Now, before I forget, I want to mention something that may or may not be useful to you. I've got two more main things to cover. One is, of course, this thing that may or may not be useful, and the other one, which I'll save for last, of course, to keep you around, is a very useful one on how to print this thing out. It's not tricky, but it's different. You see this term up here, bulk create. What the heck is that? Well, you know, a lot of people do exactly what I did, and that is create one object at a time, put the supporting objects behind them as appropriate. And again, you're only using these three objects when you build these. And they're quite comfortable with that. Other people say, you know, mine's so complex, I'm going to have a, you know, I'm going to be here forever building these things and putting all this stuff in. Well, there's an option. Let me show you a spreadsheet. Here's a spreadsheet. You'll notice it only has three columns, A, B, C. Column A is object type. Column B is name. Column C is description. So you can go and build a spreadsheet and put all of your objects in that and then import that. That puts them all in the database. It doesn't hook them all up. You still have to hook them up, but you can bring them all in rather than having to type one at a time. So you can just think about it. You don't have to use them all when you bring them in, by the way. You just bring them in. Now, the object type has to be one of the acceptable types that the software recognizes. Of course, it recognizes decisions. It recognizes input data. Those are the ovals. These are the rectangles. It recognizes knowledge sources. And remember those subsidiary objects: business objective, process, event, system, and organization. So I put a few in just to give you a feel for the variety. Then I gave them each a name. Remember, that was one of the first things I did building my model, was give each object a name. And then I didn't do it, but I suggested you should, a description for each object. So here we have quite a few objects. We have, 25 or so. And if I want to import these, it's easy to do. You simply build your spreadsheet thusly. Save this as a CSV spreadsheet, comma separated values. I think all of you now know what that is. It's an option in Excel to save as, and you save it as a CSV, comma separated value spreadsheet. Then what do? Well, then you make use of this bulk create. You go to bulk create and say, where's the file? Now, the file needs to be closed. The one you saw that was open is a duplicate of the one I'm going to use. So I browse. I got to go to my E drive. I got to scroll down here. I should have it right here somewhere at the bottom. There it is. And I say, bring that in, please. It's the exact same file as the one you just saw. It says after a few seconds, again, this would depend on the size of your file, successful, bulk creation has been done. I close that. And now when I go back to my home and search, I can hit enter. And I can say, show me all the knowledge sources. It says, wow, you got all these. So they all came in. These are the knowledge sources that were in my spreadsheet. So when I look for knowledge sources, there they are. Or if I look for decisions, just click on whatever you want, put your cursor back up here, hit enter. There are the decisions. And the knowledge sources, both of them here, because I've got both boxes checked. Okay? So now you can use these in your diagram. Now, you might notice something a little different, and it's unfortunately something we have to live with. Every one of these objects has a name, and at the end of every one of the names is a dash SK4. SK for Steve Canode, me, 4 because I've used 1, 2, and 3 in the past, so I'm using 4 today. Here's why you have to do that. We have one database for each class. We don't have a database for each student. So your objects are going to be in there with objects from the other students in your class, in your section. Which means if there was an unlikely event where 2 students created the exact same named object, it'd be confusing. So I suggest you put some delimiter at the end of your object names that it's clear that that's your object. Because everybody's going to be working on different projects, so it's not going to be a problem unless they all decide to build, hold, or sell distressed mortgages. Then it would be a problem, wouldn't it? So put something at the end of that. Sorry, I wish we could afford to have a separate database for each student, but at the moment we cannot. Okay, so that was the thing I wanted to show you that is may be useful, maybe not. Some people like bulk creation. Other people prefer to just build the objects one at a time. So I could, in fact, start using those objects that I imported. Now, the thing I said I'd show you that is critical, and you'll be glad you hung around for, is what do I do with this thing when I'm all done? Okay. I mentioned earlier that you pay no attention to this icon that says print. But you do pay attention to this one that says print all, and this one next to it that says Word. Print all, Word. Those are critical. Here's how it works. Let's say you're all done. Got this thing all built. You've put detail in all of your objects, including names, descriptions, subsidiary objects, behind the scenes, etc. Everything's there, and you'd like to see what it looks like. You click the Print All button, and you'll notice Print All and Word both grayed out for a second. And if you are successful, they will become ungrayed out shortly thereafter. And it says Print All Output Ready. Click on the Word button to download. So when you click on the Word button, I think I clicked on it. Click on the Word button. This is where you want to save that. And what do you want to call it? So I'll go to E, and I'll just call it Demo 1. Okay? And it should be there. Now, maybe you noticed, some of you that were watching closely, that Demo 1, here it is on the screen, has an extension of .xml, not DOC or DOCX. Yet I said it was a Word file. Well, it is, sort of. XML stands for Extensible Markup Language. Doesn't mean a thing to us at the moment. Might mean something to you someday. But if you double-click it, well, mine's going to open up in Notepad because I've got something different set up, but that's fine. Let me just, it's not going to be legible in Notepad, so I'm hoping that will go away pretty quick. I should have done a, yours should open up in Word. Mine, I have to tell it to use Word, so I'm sorry for that. But it will open up in Word, and then you'll be able to save it as a doc file, and you'll be able to edit it. Why would you want to edit it? Well, maybe you want to make it look a little neater. You'll have the diagram, and you'll have the entire printout. And as soon as I get a chance to show you, open with Microsoft Word. Okay, I'm opening it up with Word this time, like I should have. There it is. This is the little diagram that I just created. Now, sometimes you have to click on this and shrink it down a little bit, make sure it fits, and move it over a little bit. Okay, and then if you scroll down, it'll start listing all of the nodes. It'll start with decision nodes, then it'll do data source nodes, then know-how nodes. Well, you know, the three main types. It'll give names, it'll show the descriptions, okay? And then it'll give the details. It'll say, let me go back and talk about each of these nodes in detail. Hold or sell distressed mortgage. That was the first decision node. It's an operational decision. The answer is yes or no. The default answer is no. Here are some other things it's connected to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Here are the parameters about volume, complexity, variability. All of this is automatic. Then it will go to the next one, evaluate profitability. And if I'd put more in, more would show up there. Then it'll go to objectives. It'll put that in. So everything will be there. That will be the ARD. That thing that prints out that you'll be able to save digitally and edit and make it look a little neater if you choose, put some extra verbiage in, will be the Analytics Requirements Document. You'll hear me call it that and ARD. I like to use a shorter term, but ARD. That's what you'll get. And guess what you're going to do with that? That will be your appendix to your first project. Okay, let me get back to my slides. I got a couple more slides at the end. That's going to be the appendix. Okay? Remember, we were building this and so forth. You must have, again, I mean, you can have as many nodes in there as you think is necessary to fully describe your decision. You must have at least one somewhere that has an analytic behind it. Again, you're not building the analytic. You're not even doing much of a description of the analytic. You're just saying, you know, perhaps I want to use a dashboard. Perhaps I want to use a simple decision tree model or a regression model, something to indicate the type of analytic you think might be useful. Just an indicator. We're not asking you to do that in detail. So the end result is this complete framing. Now, let me mention a couple more things and then I'll take some questions. First, how do you get started? Well, you log in like I did and you start playing with it. I cannot overemphasize the approach that I recommend, which is to play with it a little bit, try building a couple of things. Even if you delete them, fine. But don't say, my first effort is going to be the one I hand in. Because you're going to be learning the software while you're thinking about the problem, while you're adding pieces of information and trying to pull it all together. And I know how that works. People get so wrapped up in how do I make the software work, and what node do I click on, and where's that thing Steve said I should do to make this work, that you will, in many cases, build a model that may or may not be totally comprehensible. It's so easy to get wrapped up in the software, trying to find the right buttons, the right icons, the right clicks, that you forget to take a step back and say, when I'm all done, does this decision really make sense? Is this how you make this decision? Are these the real subordinate decisions that support the meta decision? Are these the real sources of expertise that I need? And are they linked to the right other decisions and other sources of information? Are these the data sources I need? And have I fleshed all those out? Have I been complete? So once you've logged in, start experimenting. Try some things. Maybe you want to try recreating what I did. If you can do that, at least you've mastered the software. The software is not hard. As I said, it's got a degree of depth that we don't get to in this course because we don't have enough time. But I've had students use it and take it back to their organizations and say, this is exactly what my organization needs. We're always sitting around in what I call the Bogside Method, a bunch of guys and gals sitting around together, trying to decide how to make decisions, and then we don't remember what we did, how we did, who was going to do it, where we're going to get the data, whether we needed expertise, what kind we needed. We don't have an audit trail. We don't remember what we did. And I'm saying, well, for a relatively affordable price, this software is pretty good for doing that. It doesn't do much else, but it does do that. But by the way, the use of it is really growing. I'm trying to remember one of the large software companies that makes routers and everything uses this for every single decision they make, and they said we wouldn't make any decisions without it because this way, when we leave the meeting, we know what we have to do, and then we have to go do it. And then people can't come back and say, "Oh, I didn't know you needed me to weigh in on that," or "I didn't know you needed to have access to the regulations from the FHA or whatever." No, we put that in. We put your name next to it. One of the things I did not show you, if you go back to home, is updated. If you were doing this in a group thing, look at all these updates over here. It says Steve Cano did a lot of updates 9-10 minutes ago. Keeps updates by everyone, and of course you could share this with a group. You can have group people editing the document, much as Google Docs does and other things do. You can have group edits, but the past editions are also saved. So that's another nice feature. So when you get your login, you should go in and play around with it a little bit. I'm a big fan of what Michael Schrage said, that serious play is an important part of learning software and or decision making. And that's what it takes, serious play. I don't want to play with it forever. You want to eventually reach, start converging towards your decision that you're going to use for your assignment. Now, I want to caution you also that DecisionsFirst does not work with Chrome because you have to install one time an add-in called Silverlight, and Chrome does not support that. The complete walkthrough is at this link. Okay, Mr. Taylor does a great job. It's his software. He knows more about it than I do. The specific tutorials on specific aspects. You say, well, I'd like to see how you really do that analytic thing or the objectives or whatever. There they are. They're both they're both video, and there's a text version. So if you say, well, I'm a text person. I like to watch the text. I like to read the text. No, I'm a visual learner. I like to watch videos. Okay, they're both there. Additional help, articles, written tutorials, etc. Now, we do have DecisionsFirst on contract to provide support. You should not take your questions to them initially. You should take them to your TA and or faculty member. They have some expertise in this, and they can solve many of the problems quite quickly. Barring that, if they say, nope, we can't figure it out, then you go and send your request to support@decisionsfirst.com. Okay. You can also go look at these other places where they have some information. And then this is a special link that Mr. Taylor created just for UMUC. You go there, it's tips for our UMUC students. Please look at that. Please look at that. It's very helpful, and he adds to it all the time as more things they discover that they can be of benefit to you. It is extremely helpful. He was nice enough to create that specifically for us. So my last slide, what is it you're going to do? And you have until the end of week 3 to do it. This is actually the midpoint, I guess you could say, sort of week 1. You have until the end point of week 3. So you still have about 2.5 weeks, which is plenty of time. As I said, the software is not any more complicated than what I've shown you, basically. It's an individual assignment. It is an implementation of Decisions First. Okay, and we're looking for 2 things. We're looking that you understand the concept of framing and how important it is. We're looking that you can use the software. Okay, beyond that, we're looking at the depth, the breadth, how well you did in terms of describing and fully framing the decision. So there's some additional guidance, some specific tasks, but basically you're going to have about a 4 or 5 page document with the ARD, the Analytics Requirement Document, as an attachment. So you say, well, what do I do in that 4 or 5 pages? Well, it's double spaced, so it's not that much. But what you're going to do is describe the decision that you've analyzed, that you've framed. You might say, I decided to do a decision about distressed mortgages. Here's why I think that's important. Here's how often we do that, and so forth. Now, some of that will be a little bit duplicative of what's in the ARD, the Analytics Requirements Document, but not much. You're really doing sort of an outline, an introduction, a description of the problem, why you think it's important, why you chose it, how it meets the criteria that I outlined earlier in the presentation. Remember, trivial, operational decisions that have a bottom line impact, measurable. So all of your pages should be spent sort of discussing that aspect, and then when the faculty member reads that, he or she will have a good understanding of what the problem is you chose to take on, what the decision you chose to outline, and then when they have the detailed ARD attached to that, they'll have a pretty good way of looking at how well you were able to frame that decision. So that's what's in that. People say, why? I don't know anything about any kind of decisions. That's hard to believe, that you'd be in graduate school and wouldn't have some knowledge of some operational decision that's made. Because sometimes I get questions like people say, can I use this to describe decisions about building a house? Well, the answer is you could use it, but it wouldn't be very effective because, again, we're looking at decisions that are operational and occur frequently. Do you build houses frequently? If you were Ryan Holmes or Pulte or somebody, then yes, it might be a useful endeavor. If you're somebody who's building one home every 20 or 30 years, probably not. That would not be the best use of the software. So you might want to look at decisions that are a little more operationally oriented. And that requires some thinking. So you got a little bit of time to think about these things as you're learning the software. This is just a slide I showed that has a lot of perhaps indicative of the kinds of decisions you might be useful. You know, how do I keep a customer from churning? That was kind of like Mr. Taylor's decision. How do I detect suspicious activities to prevent fraud? How likely is the person that's defaulting on a loan? How do I identify students who are going to drop out of the MSDA program? So you can see there's a lot of operational decisions that I think you can come up with if you give yourself a little bit of effort. And this is just a slide showing that bulk create. Okay, so I'm going to stop. Try to stop sharing my screen. And I'm back at the main website for our Cisco meeting. Cisco is the company that uses Decisions First. I forgot the name, but it's Cisco. I'll be darned. Cisco uses Decisions First for all of their decisions of any other than trivial, of course, and for all of their operational decisions, they use Decisions First. They're one of the main clients of Mr. Taylor. Okay, at this point, I'm going to say I'll open up the chat room and see if there are questions. And again, this was not a comprehensive everything there is to know about Decisions First, but hopefully it was enough that you're going to feel a little bit more comfortable when you wade in. Again, Mr. Taylor's tutorials are excellent. They're more in depth. They're longer than mine. They're more thorough, and he has those mini ones on every single one of the different kinds of icons or objects you can use. Okay, I'm going to wait a few minutes. Again, I know I talk fast, but hopefully I was clear enough in showing that. Somebody's got one. Here we go. You mentioned the ARD document with the appendix. Can you elaborate on it? Can you talk about the project and the ARD document? I tried to elaborate on it a little bit. When you print out that ARD, remember, it is essentially a Word document. I showed you, even though it says XML on the extension, when you open it up in Word, you can then save it as a doc file. You can edit it. But the ARD is what you're going to attach to your write-up. And your write-up's only going to be a few pages, sort of describing why you picked the decision you picked, why you think it's an important decision, how well it meets the criteria that I've outlined, you know, measurable ROI, non-trivial, bottom line impact, etc. Maybe some background on it if you have other information. And then that'll be it for the document that you will attach the ARD to. So your faculty member will be looking at the first few pages, the written pages in APA format, to say, oh, I see what Steve's doing. He's talking about selling mortgages, and here's why he thinks that's an important decision. And here he's been with the company 25 years, and he knows a lot about it, and so forth and so on. And he knows there's multiple sources, and he pulled them all together. And then I go look at the ARD and say, oh, wow, look at this nice diagram and how he linked all that together. So I think that's the best description I can give you of how that's going to work. So the ARD is not your project. I mean, the ARD is not your entire assignment. It is attachment, but it is the guts of the assignment because that's where you're using the software. Can I repeat where I'm posting my slides? I will send my slides to each of the faculty members, and they will post them in your classroom. Since I don't have a section of 610 this semester, I will have to send the slides to the faculty members. I'll also send them, obviously, a link to the recording of this session. So if you'd like to go back and listen to it again, or anyone who wasn't here, of course, needs to listen to it. And we don't penalize people who cannot attend live, and we don't give extra credit for those who do. But we're delighted to have people here, of course. Very important. It keeps me honest. So, okay, what other questions do we have? Again, I'm just trying to make sure you're reasonably comfortable when you wade into this software. I know how it is. You always have a fog factor when you go into new software. You know, it's always at first you say, what in the world is this? And then as you begin to use it, sort of the fog lifts. Well, we're hoping the fog will lift rather quickly on this software because we're trying to give you enough of a jump start where you can see that, hey, that's not too bad. I think I know how to do that. So again, try a small one first. Just try putting a few objects in, saving it. Try adding one of those supporting objects behind the scenes. Try making sure you can download it and print it out. And then after you've done that, then start thinking long and hard about, okay, what is the decision I want to submit for this first assignment? What do I know about, or what happens in my organization that I can find out about? That's primarily an operational decision. In other words, it recurs often. Each time it occurs, we have some kind of an impact on our bottom line. It's a non-trivial decision. We have to think about it each time. If it's trivial, where, yeah, you know, automatically 6 is the answer, then, of course, we don't need much analytics for that. But if it's something where every time it comes up, and it comes up often, we have to think it through and say, now, what do we do here? Is this a kind of a thing we want to do, or do we want to keep this one? We want to sell this one? Or so that. In terms of business application, can the Watson software be used for special projects or solely for long-term recurring decisions? As I think I mentioned, you can use it for any kind of a decision. And in fact, Mr. Taylor doesn't say, you know, he doesn't preclude that. He thinks it works best for repeatable decisions. But if you said, you know, I'm going to make this big decision, life decision, or my organization's making a big decision about whether to move to California or move to Japan or quit making a certain product, you could probably find, I think you could find value in fleshing that out, because otherwise people are going to make the same mistakes. They're going to have different frames in their head as to what's important on that decision. I've done, when I taught decision making several times in the past, and I've actually done consulting on organizations to help make decisions. I can tell you they all have this problem. In fact, I may have referred in your earlier 610 lesson to the book Decision Traps. If you read Decision Traps, if you read Dan Ariely's book Predictably Irrational, you will find and you will be convinced that we all have inherent biases. And one of the ways to help mitigate those is to start putting it down on paper. So when Harry shows up and says, I didn't know you needed my expertise, you pull up the diagram and say, you're right here, Harry. See that block with your name on it that says need Harry's expertise? That's you. So, you can't solve everything. I'm not saying it's a surefire solution, but you can really start to get a good frame. And the importance of framing, I don't think you can overestimate that. I really don't. Okay, sorry for a long-winded answer. So you could use it for that, but it works best when you have repeatable, non-trivial operational decisions that have a measurable, although small, impact on the bottom line each time they occur. Good questions. I'm glad people were patient while I ran and put a fresh battery in my mouse. It just died on me at a very inopportune time. Okay, well, I don't see other questions showing up. That doesn't mean you can't ask them later on. I will certainly respond, and if your faculty member needs any assistance from me, I'm available. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. So I'm sure that